Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's event, the conferment of the 2022 Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize for the Social Sciences, which will be followed by the scientific lecture from this year's recipient. I am Johan Cruz, Knowledge Management Officer of the Philippine Social Science Council, and I will be your MC and moderator for today. Before we begin, let me read some reminders for everyone here. During the open forum, attendees may send their questions through the Q&A panel for those joining in Zoom, and those in the Facebook Live can put their questions in the comment section. Avoid spamming the question and answer panel, the Zoom chat box, and the Facebook comment section with unnecessary and irrelevant messages. The entire the entire session is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our Facebook page right after this event. E-certificates of attendance will be issued to attendees who will accomplish the online evaluation form. The link to the form will be posted towards the end of this event. Now, to formally welcome us to this morning's session, let us listen to the opening message of the Chair of the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Social Science Council. She is a faculty member of the Department of Family Life and Child Development at the College of Home Economics, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Deputy Director for Training, Outreach, and Extension Program Unit of the UP Center for Women's and Gender Studies, the President of the Women and Gender Studies Association of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Excelsa C. Tongson.
The Sicat family, distinguished guests, colleagues at the Philippine Social Science Council, friends, mga kababayan here and abroad, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. I trust that we are safe and healthy amid the unrelenting COVID-19 pandemic. I am delighted to welcome all of you to the conferment of the Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize for the Social Sciences and to honor the legacy and contributions of Dr. Lor to make PSSC a visible and permanent entity, and for making PSSC the leading institution for the promotion of social sciences in the country. I wish to extend a special welcome to the winners and their academic institutions, mentors, their families and friends who have supported them to reach this point. Congratulations! You're being recognized for your exemplary work that promotes the progress of our nation's social sciences. I express my heartfelt gratitude to the Sicat family, especially to Dr. Gerardo Sicat and Ms. Michelle Sicat Powell for conceptualizing this award. May the LMS award inspires us to work harder to respond appropriately and timely to the issues confronting the country and promote the well-being of every single Filipino. As one of the country's longest-running and financially viable nonprofit organizations, PSSC stands to facilitate a continued exchange of ideas and innovations necessary in harnessing the collective intellectual resources of the social science disciplines to reveal the truths and facts and adopt initiatives that best address the unique and challenging circumstances that confront our lives, families, groups, and communities. Let me also thank the judges and the PSSC staff for working tirelessly to make this event a success. Once again, congratulations to the winners. Thank you very much, and mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tongson. Now, to introduce to you the life and works of Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat, as well as the LMS Prize for the Social Sciences, we prepared a short video presentation. This video will run for approximately 20 minutes and is just a snippet of a more than an hour-long documentary on the life and works of Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat. In the interest of time, we have decided to just show you a portion of it. Should you be interested to see the entire documentary produced by Cine Sanyata, it will soon be available on the PSSC website and YouTube channel of the Philippine Social Science Council. In the meantime, let us watch this.
If philosophy is responsible for defining the nation's soul, and the humanities would be in charge of nurturing our hearts, then social scientists should be the ones responsible of shaping our minds. That is the effort of all these relevant disciplines. We should remember Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat as a humble, supportive advocate of, for lack of a better term, Filipinizing mergers of at least two political sciences, and at best the merger of all, Filipinization of the merger of all social sciences.
Professor Sicat was the first female chairperson of the department and the first and only one to get her PhD in political science from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She actively promoted the advancement of political science in the country. She served as president of the Philippine Political Science Association and editor of the association's journal, the Philippine Political Science Journal. Professor Sicat was also an active member of the International Political Science Association, or IPSA.
She was already one of the more highly respected members of the department, having graduated or finished her PhD from MIT. That was quite something that was celebrated within the department. And of course, her work particularly on methods and theory was something that I think a number of members of our faculty, especially at the senior level, recognized in terms of her of who she was, and what her main contribution as a political scientist were.
In recognition of her pioneering introduction of that field, our department itself, the department began to introduce actually and require more quantitative-oriented courses na revived din yung Philippine Political Science Journal. And the Philippine Political Science Journal, since about siguro mga almost 10 years now, has become an internationally peer-reviewed journal, Scopus.
In the 70s, she had a big role reviving the Philippine Political Science Association and reviving and strengthening the journal. How important it is. I think one of her lasting legacies for political science in particular is to make sure that yearly we have an annual conference and we need to have a journal. This is a continuation and a tribute of the work that Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat has started in promoting and developing social science research in the Philippines.
The building that is a monument to who you are, and your legacy to the social sciences speaks for itself. But I would like to thank you personally for inspiring me, for heading me into a path that made me the kind of scholar that I am today. I owe to you maybe my humility in what I do, because I saw that in you. And thank you for being a good teacher who cared for her students. And thank you for living your life so well that we will remember you forever. Thank you very much, Mom. Thank you for your legacy.
The LMS prize for the social sciences is an important grant, particularly for graduate students. So, graduate students who are preparing their thesis and doctoral students who are preparing their dissertation will really benefit a lot from this.
How did the LMS award come to be? How was it conceived? I think that's an interesting thing because we never even thought about it. One of my children, Michelle, she wanted to honor her mother. She asked me, Dad, these resources I have can help support some scholarships. Perhaps we can have connected to PSSC because your mother worked at PSSC. And so we asked the PSSC whether they were interested in it. And pretty soon, Dr. Portus, who is the executive director, thought it was a very good idea to have an LMS award in the social sciences. And we discussed this in the course of several months, and we came up with a conception of having an award given substantially using the resources that Michelle had to be given as reward, and to be sure that it helps propagate the relevance of the Philippine Social Science Council in the promotion of social sciences in the country.
Well, to me, the Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize is an expression of love. The love of a daughter to a mother, the love of a family to its matriarch. So it recognizes and honors the legacy of a social scientist. And this will actually expand PSS's efforts to really promote the social sciences and to expand its support to social scientists.
Establishing the awards is a way of showing or letting people know how important the work my mom has started is to the profession, to social sciences, to the community, and the Philippines in general. The idea of coming up with the LMS awards is really just to encourage people to continue working towards the improvement of the social sciences. My understanding of my mom's work, it wasn't only political science, it was really the social sciences in general. And she got a lot of people working together, helping out, understanding cultures, how people behaved and how people could work together to be able to improve at the community level. The awards would actually, or hopefully, inspire our young people to pursue that kind of thinking.
We really acknowledge that thesis and dissertations are good sources of information because they are reviewed by technical experts and there are academics to really look into the framework, into the methods, into the manner in which the research is conducted.
Ang kagandahan ng award na yon, it encourages students who are writing their thesis to actually aspire to do a very good thesis, which is, I think that's the point behind the award. So the award is really about trying to make students aware of a particular standard, that they have to aspire to, in writing their thesis, So in that sense, it still goes back to the legacy of trying to insist on academic excellence, as part of what she tried to bring into the department when she was actually teaching there.
She paid particular attention to methods, to the methodology, the arguments. I think in a way that helped a lot of us try to be very careful in the way we write, even if we're focusing on different specializations, different areas of interest. This special award named after her is a very good tribute to her for her contributions. It's a way of recognizing her as one of the people instrumental in the continued relevance of social sciences and pushing the role of the social sciences as relevant not only in academia but also in policy making and in Philippine society and the region as well. but at the same time also the grant is also a way of continuing her legacy.
The award itself, given the reputation of the person of which the award is being named after, should send a very positive signal to younger researchers, that they should try to keep up with the high levels of scholarship, associated with the name of the grantor, in this case, Professor Sicat or the family,
I was really happy to know about the Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize Award for the Social Sciences. I think that through this, many of our young social science and particularly political science scholars will get to know Professor Loretta Makasiar Sicat. Through this prize, I hope that her legacy of excellent scholarship and dedicated service to the social science disciplines will continue and will be passed on to the younger generation of social science scholars.
The objectives of the LMS award are threefold. One is that we want to promote the social sciences by rewarding deserving graduate students who've produced outstanding dissertations or thesis. Second is really want to help broaden the PSSC's impact. And third, quite frankly, I want to honor the legacy and the contributions of my mother, Loretta Makasiar Sicat. She paved the way to make PSSC the foremost institution in promoting the social sciences in the Philippines. The Loretta Makasiar Sicat Award is open to any graduate student who has written and completed a dissertation or a thesis. And this has a significant monetary award, probably one of the more significant awards that are out there.
Each work that won is a building block towards the promotion of more studies that elevate social science analysis in the Philippine context.
That is why in this Loretta Makasiar Sicat program, there should be a dissemination of the results of the project. So there will be a forum or maybe a webinar that will be organized by PSSC to make sure or to ensure that the knowledge that was created by the thesis and dissertation is disseminated to a larger public. This project is really enduring, in the sense that that social scientists are not really very much recognized. Through this Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize, we will really be giving recognition to social scientists.
I am not the one who's spearheading this. I am supporting my sister and my dad who are spearheading it. Wholeheartedly support it, obviously.
The idea that you honor work undertaken by scholars, young scholars, and recognizing them, giving them sufficient amount of recognition through the selection of their money and giving them not an inconsequential price for it would be a good jerk of support for the social sciences in the Philippines. That, I think, is the main point.
She would never have named the award after herself. That's another thing. My mom was the most humble person ever. She was always emanating outwards, never kind of elevating herself. So this is really interesting that it's named after her, and of course we love that it's named after her. But she herself would never have wanted it to be named after her. You know, I can just see that. So,
She was always explaining to us how important it was to consider how people or how lives are impacted by what is happening around the environment that we are living in. The values that she shared with us throughout her life in great thinking of helping others in whatever way we can, whether it's small or big, it didn't really matter. Even if we're just individuals, how we can make a difference in other people's lives. That would be the essence of helping others and the social sciences.
I encourage those who have completed their master's thesis and their dissertation to submit your thesis and dissertation to LMS Prize Award for the Social Sciences. This is a prestigious award, and it will really lend fame and honor not only to you, but also to the legacy of Loretta Makasiar Sicat.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, and that is the Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize for the Social Sciences. As I mentioned earlier, a longer version of the documentary video titled Lore of Lore will soon be viewable on the PSSC website and YouTube channel. Now to talk to us about the selection process of this year's LMS Prize recipient, may I call on the Executive Director of the Philippine Social Science Council, who was also a faculty member of the Department of Communication Research, College of Mass Communication, UP Diliman. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Lourdes M. Portus.
Good morning. Is my audio okay?
Yes,
Can you hear
Doctor.
me?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So, to the Sicat family, to our chair, Echel Tongson, and the other members of the Board of Trustees of PSSC, the PSSC staff, the UPPI, the proud UPPI where our winner came from, our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. In the past 5 decades, the PSSC has been administering 4 regular programs. So these are the Research Award Program, a modest financial assistance to Filipino graduate students currently doing their thesis and dissertation, the Conference Award Program to assist member associations to mount their annual conferences, the Travel Assistance Program to partially finance the travel needs of those presenting academic papers in international conferences, and the Virginia Miralao Excellence in Research Award to recognize the published works of young social scientists. Last year, we have added to the list of PSSC grants the Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat for the social sciences. The prize is unique in that it generously rewards the winner 500% more. Imagine that. Whew, 500% more, 5,000 more US dollars to the winner of this award. It's really a very generous award. But of course, the prize money is not the only consideration. It is what the award stands for, to stimulate scholarship in the social sciences and develop research excellence and promote a research culture among social scientists or students working for their graduate degrees. The LMS Prize expands PSS's grants programs and establishes to fund to recognize the works of graduate students who have inquired into theoretical frames, perspectives, and the processes of development issues in the Philippines using a social science perspective. Okay. Moreover, the award seeks to honor the legacy and contribution of Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat for making PSSC the leading institution in the promotion of the social sciences. PSSC is indebted to her for training and repository of social science resources in the country. Dr. LMS was once the chair of the executive director of PSSC and was responsible for negotiating with UP for PSSC's current location, including the gift of the Japanese government for the PSSC building. We thank wholeheartedly the Sicat family, especially Michelle, for the trust and confidence to PSSC to administer this program, handle the technical aspects of the prize, and serve as a repository of all documents related to it. We launched the program in September 2021. Can you show that slide, please? Starting with a call for nomination, we designed and disseminated the communication and publicity materials for the grant program through PSSC websites, Facebook, and other venues. We prepared the mechanics of the LMS prize in consultation with Dr. Jerry Sicat and Michelle, and they actively participated in conceptualizing the program, its mechanics and guidelines, and were hands-on in the finalization of the process of the LMS prize. By November, we received 22 nominations, but processed only 21 because the other paper did not belong to the social sciences. The initial requirement, a 5-page extended abstract, was double-blind reviewed by distinguished scholars from the PSSC's roster of experts based on the related disciplines of the nominees. This selection committee, using a set of criteria, trimmed down the nominees to 5 finalists. Thank you, selection committee, for this hard work. Afterwards, a 3-member board of judges was constituted and performed the daunting task of reading and assessing 5 thick manuscripts. We would like to thank them for their diligence and meticulous critical reading of the scholarly works. I have the honor and privilege to introduce them now. First on the list is academician of the National Academy of Social Science and Technology. He was a former chair of the PSSC, a distinguished university professor and university fellow of De La Salle University, and head of the Psychology of Hope and Well-Being Laboratory of DLSU. Ladies and gentlemen, let us acknowledge Dr. Alan Benedict I. Bernardo. Next is the current Vice President for Public Affairs of the UP system. She served as Department Chair of the CMC in UP Diliman, a former Dean of the College of Mass Comm, a UNESCO Commissioner, Philippine Daily Inquirer Ombudsman, and now the President of the Philippines Communication Society. Please let us recognize Dr. Elena E. Pernia. And last but not the least is a marine anthropologist, former chair of PSSC and director of the UP Diliman Center for International Studies. She was the only Filipino member of IPBES, or the Global Assessment on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. She is a board member of UGAT, or the Ugnayang Agham Tao. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Cynthia N. Sayas. Now, you must be wondering what were the criteria used in selecting the winners. Here is the scoring sheet. So first is concept and content, which is 65. This includes clarity of research problem, the rationale and objectives, which should be clear and concise, and the focus should be on social science. The research problem must be contextualized within existing literature and theoretical frameworks. The use of theories as guide and analytical tools must be present. Also, the research methodology must be well described, including the research strategy and design that was used in the research. The results, findings of the research must be clearly and comprehensively stated. This must also answer the problem stated in the paper. Finally, the conclusion and recommendation shall be borne by the study, and this should clearly show their implications to the study and not just lips of faith statements. Next is the significance of the research, which is 15%, and this means the research should be relevant and must have a new contribution to the social science body of knowledge, and it should have implications on policy research, decision making, and solutions. Next is practicability and functionality of the research, which is 10%. It means that this research must be geared towards practicability and functionality. It means it is useful to research stakeholders, and that should be obvious in the paper. Finally, the overall presentation is 10%, and this includes content of the research, which should be cohesive, and the flow of the discussion should be organized. Writing should be coherent and does not have grammatical lapses and poor sentence construction. Last April 3 was LMS birthday, and that's the reason why we are holding the conferment now. She would have been 86 years old. Happy birthday, LMS. Finally, I wish to thank all the men and women behind the scene for this award and the conferment event. Of course, number one are the indefatigable PSSC staff members. You know who you are. The selection committee, the board of judges, Sine Sanyata, maraming salamat, and of course, the Sicat family. Thank you all. For those who are here, good morning. Mabuhay ang PSSC, mabuhay ang LMS Prize Award for the Social Sciences.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pertus. Now, at this point, we wish to recognize the finalists for this year's Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize. The fifth and fourth prize winners will receive a certificate of recognition, while the third and second prize winners will receive a certificate of recognition and a cash prize of $500 each. To give recognition for our 4 finalists, let me call on once again Dr. Excelsa Tongsan and Dr. Lourdes Pertus.
Thank you, Johan. So I have the honor, ladies and gentlemen, to present the 5th prize winner of the 2022 LMS Prize for the Social Sciences. She is May Flor Centina. Are you here, May Flor? PhD in Guidance Counseling from the Philippine Normal University for her dissertation, Pakikhiusa sa Kalikupan, a process of framework for developing eco-therapeutic interventions. Palakpakan po natin si May Flor Centina. And then the 4th prize winner of the...
Nawala yung sounds ko, sorry.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, Dr. Pertus, please keep going.
Right. The 4th prize winner of the 2022 LMS Prize for the Social Sciences is June Michael B. Salcor. Are you here, Michael? MA in Media Studies, Broadcast Department of the College of Mass Communication, where I came from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, for his thesis, Signing Off Contractual Labor in the Philippines Television Broadcasting, Off-Air Narratives of People from Below in History. Palakpakan po natin si June Michael Salcor. And now, may I give the virtual floor to Dr. Tongson to acknowledge the 3rd and 2nd prize winners.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Portus. Ladies and gentlemen, the 3rd prize winner of the 2022 LMS Prize for the Social Sciences is Miko A. Galang, MA in International Studies from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, for his thesis, The Security Pursuits of a Small State, a Comparative Study of the Philippines' Security Partnerships with Australia, Japan, and Vietnam, 2010 to 2016. And of course, the 2nd prize winner of the 2022 LMS Prize for the Social Sciences is Wilfredo Gabriel A. Gapas, MA in English Language Studies from the University of Santo Tomas for his thesis, The Newsworthiness of an Armed Conflict, a Corpus-Assisted Multimodal Discourse, Analysis of Selected Philippine Newspaper Reports. Congratulations.
A heartfelt congratulations to all our finalists. Now, before we formally confer the 2022 Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize Award, let us hear a few words from the institution that nominated him, the University of the Philippines Population Institute. Here to introduce to us the recipient and his winning thesis is a professor of demography and is the director of the UP Population Institute. Her current research interests include the aging of the population, technical demography, and population and development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Grace T. Cruz.
Thank you very much, Johan. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure and honor to introduce the awardee for the first Loretta Makasiar Sicat or LMS Prize for the Social Sciences. The recipient is a very young and promising demographer, Mr. Sanny D. Afable. He's easily one of the best minds of his cohort and one I have the pleasure of working with. Sanny has an outstanding academic background. He distinguished himself as editor-in-chief of the Philippine Collegian. He graduated from the UP Diliman with a degree of Bachelor of Science in Statistics cum laude, and later pursued a master's degree in demography from the University of the Philippines Population Institute. In graduate school, he continued to reap awards such as the UBPI Academic Excellence Award for his outstanding performance. He was also the first recipient of the Josefina V. Cabigon Memorial Scholarship Thesis Grant. After graduation, He was immediately hired as a researcher by the UP Population Institute and was recently sent to the University of Namur in Belgium as part of the UPPI and the University of Namur Erasmus Exchange Program. In fact, Sanny just arrived last night from Belgium just in time for this event. As his thesis advisor, I was truly impressed with Sanny's discipline, determination, focus, and resilience in ensuring that he maintained his academic course despite the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. His thesis, entitled Demographic Correlates of Late Life Depression in the Philippines, Exploring Gender Differences, is an exploration into the nature, associated factors, and gender nuances of depression in older Filipinos. The study used the baseline data of the 2018 longitudinal study of aging and health in the Philippines, which forms part of the UPPI and Demographic Research and Development Foundation's current research efforts, focusing on the country's older people. UPPI nominated the study for the LMS Prize, particularly for its careful and rigorous application of advanced quantitative methods to draw well-founded conclusions about the intersection of aging, gender, and mental health. In addition, it's guided by an integrative framework of health states which views aging and depression not only from a biomedical perspective, but more importantly, as a social phenomenon. The study generally highlights the multidisciplinary nature of demography as a social science field and is particularly demonstrating the marriage of population studies and psychology. The study is significant in that it focuses on one of the neglected areas of our population, the older people. This paper is the first to establish and examine the depressive symptomatology of older Filipinos that sheds light on the dimensions and measurements of depressive symptoms among older people. This study is particularly significant during the time of COVID-19 pandemic, which has highlighted the health and economic vulnerability of older Filipinos. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the review panel for recognizing the study's scholarly merits and, more importantly, its contribution to understanding our country's older persons. I also wish to thank PSSC and, of course, the family of Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat for this LMS Prize award that recognizes Filipino graduate students for their excellent research and contributions to the social sciences. It's indeed a distinct honor that the first LMS Prize winner is a demographer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed my pleasure to present the very first LMS Prize winner. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sanny D. Afable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cruz. Now for the moment that we've all been waiting for, to formally confer the 2022 Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize for the Social Sciences, let us once again call on Dr. Tongson, Dr. Pertus, and Dr. Cruz.
Okay, it's an honor on behalf of the Philippine Social Science Council to formally confer the 2022 Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize for the Social Sciences to Mr. Sanny D. Afable, graduate of MA Demography and Research Associate at the University of the Philippines Population Institute for his thesis, Demographic Correlates of Late Life Depression in the Philippines, Exploring Gender Differences. Congratulations, Mr. Sanny Afable.
Maraming salamat po.
Congratulations to our 2022 Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize recipient, Mr. Sanny D. Afable. As the top winner, Mr. Afable will receive a cash prize of $5,000 and a certificate of recognition. Now, without further ado, let us listen to his scientific lecture about his winning article, Demographic Correlates of Late Life Depression in the Philippines Exploring Gender Differences. Mr. Afable, take it away.
I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. I will share my screen. So, magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Thank you to my advisor, Dr. Grace T. Cruz, for that generous introduction. The UPPI just sent me to a short research exchange program in Belgium. And I guess one of my realizations there is that more than being recognized, what young social scientists scream for is the chance for the research to be supported and to be heard. I read the titles of the finalists in this award, and I am in awe of the range and relevance of the topics covered, from defense to media to psychology. And so I thank the Philippine Social Science Council for this great opportunity and for its efforts to advance scholarship in the country. So this morning, I am presenting my thesis entitled The Demographic Correlates of Late Life Depression in the Philippines, Exploring Gender Differences. In the next few years, we will see the Philippines become an aging society. A society is said to be aging if at least 10% of its population are older people. And as we welcome this growing older population, this poses challenges to healthcare. One area that is largely unexplored but needs immediate attention is the mental health of older persons who are at greater risk of experiencing depressive disorders. As you can see in this graph, the prevalence of depression in people aged 50 and above is about twice that in the working population. This is an alarming pattern, given that depression is not very openly talked about, especially among the elderly. Depression is a primary area of concern, given that it is the primary precursor of suicide, cases of which rises in the oldest ages. The pandemic may have had adverse impacts on the mental health of our older persons. As one commentator puts it, there has been a pandemic not only of the virus, but also of depression and anxiety around the world. For one, the Natasha Goldborn Foundation, a nonprofit that offers a crisis line, reported that a third of its callers were older persons during the first 3 months of the pandemic, when we were put under lockdown. Most of them reported feelings of loneliness. As you would see later, loneliness figures as an important and the single most important indicator of depression among older Filipinos. Several research gaps hinder our better understanding of the nature and causes of depression in older people. First, there are conflicting views on the age trajectory of depression. There are those who argue that older people develop emotional maturity and are thus less vulnerable to depressive symptoms. On the other hand, it could also be that stressors accumulate in late life, and this makes older persons more depressive. Second, we know little about the symptomatology or the body of signs or indicators of depression in this population. Third, to my knowledge, only one study has examined the structural validity of the Csd scale in a purposive sample of Filipinos. Fourth, the experience of depression is not uniform across socio-demographic groups. And this brings me to my fifth point. It is almost a universal observation that among women, depression is higher than in men, but we know little about the nature of the sex or gender differences. Against these contexts, the goal of my study was to explore the demographic correlates of depressive symptoms in older Filipinos. I used the baseline data of the 2018 longitudinal study of aging and health in the Philippines, or LSAP, to first assess the structural validity of the Center for Epidemiological Studies, or the Csd scale. It's because we lack knowledge on the symptomatology of depression in older Filipinos. After doing so, I wanted to examine the severity and variation of depressive symptomatology by demographic groups. I also had to take into account the multivariate associations and control for other factors, as well as item bias. It's possible that a particular group is more inclined to respond in favor of one item for reasons beyond depression, and so we have to control for that. For example, in the longer versions of the CSD scale, crying spells exhibited item bias for women. And that is, women can have greater susceptibility to crying spells for reasons that are not really related to depression. And so this item was excluded in the shorter version of the scale. Finally, I wanted to analyze gender differences in the symptomatology and correlates of late life depression. So now let me briefly discuss the study framework. Because we are studying older persons and the processes that govern mortality, it always pays to go back to this conceptual model of health states and transitions based on the disablement process. Essentially, it shows that the progression from a healthy state to being sick up to dying is not a simple one-way linear process. One can go from a healthy state to one of disability and then return to a healthy state or functional loss or ultimately death. In this diagram, you can classify depression as a disease, condition, or impairment, depending on its severity. My particular interest is in the factors, particularly the demographic factors that are associated with depression. So to carry out my research objectives, first, we begin with the 11 CSD scale indicators. These items operationalize and measure a single or multiple constructs or facets of depression. Now, these multiple factors may or may not be reflective of a higher order construct of depression. Think of it as when someone defines good leadership, a really abstract concept. It is not directly measurable, and you need more specific and directly measurable items like how often does the leader show up in the most difficult times, does the leader lie, etc. So depression as a latent construct also works like that. The shaded diagram refers to the factor structure or the correlational relationship between the items that are used to measure a latent medical construct like depression. The demographic variables, as well as other correlates, may be associated with the factor structure, as well as the responses to the CSD scale. Finally, I stratify my analysis by gender, taking note of the possible gender differences as the literature suggests. There are specific variables that I explored in my study. I won't go through them one by one, but I considered social demographic, health-related, psychosocial, and behavioral variables. For this study, again, I used the baseline data of the 2018 LSAP. It is a study conducted by the Demographic Research and Development Foundation with funding from the Economic Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. The study used a multi-stage sampling design, and it covered not just the older persons, but also their caregiver and one of their adult children. In the LSAP, the 11-item CSD scale was used to measure depression. In various populations, the CSD scale has been found to be a good tool for assessing depressive symptoms in the general population. A total of 5,209 individuals, community-dwelling older persons, were interviewed regarding how often they experienced the symptom in the last 3 months. Now, from this information, I performed confirmatory factor analysis to establish the factor structure of the CSD scale. In a nutshell, the CFA is a dimension reduction technique, but unlike the exploratory factor analysis, it is guided by theories about how the construct is best represented by a given set of indicators. To further delve into the item characteristics and test performance, I used methods in item response theory. IRT basically evaluates the scale by examining the items themselves without being affected by the characteristics of the sample. So this is more robust than traditional tests for internal consistency and validity like Cronbach alpha. Once I had arrived at a general depression factor score, I tested for group differences. After doing so, I analyzed multivariate associations using the multiple indicators, multiple causes, or the mimic model. It's a type of structural equation model. The SEM, or the structural equation model, is a procedure used if you want to examine a predefined relationship between a number of variables, this time incorporating exogenous variables like age and sex in the CFA model. Finally, all of these procedures were stratified by gender. So there were separate analysis for men and for women. Now to my results. On the structural validity of the CSD scale, I tested several hypothetical factor models, and I found that the CSD scale is best conceived as a multidimensional scale. So you have here a path diagram, and this refers to the symptomatology of depression in older men. Now, the number in between each arrow refers to the standardized factor loading, which ranges from -1 to 1, and it gives you the strength of the correlation between the two objects. For example, the standardized factor loading between the depressed affect and being sad is 0.75, which is considerably high. The factor loading for between somatic retardation and effort is 0.44, and that's quite low. Now we can just focus on the ellipsis, or the relationship between the four subfactors and the higher order construct of depression. The subfactor that has the highest factor loading in men is somatic retardation at 0.92, and that is very high. On the other hand, the positive affect, as we would expect, has a negative relationship with depression, but it only has a factor loading of -0.24, and that is considerably low. We can see very similar results in women. In the conceptualization of depression, the depressed affect and somatic retardation are also the most important subdimensions in women. But the key difference between men and women is which factor is the most contributing. In women, the depressed affect almost has a perfect correlation with depression, given a standardized factor loading of 0.96. So let's take note of this gendered nuance in the factor structure, because it can help us explain why women tend to have more severe depressive symptoms than men. Now we delve further into the utility or characteristics of each CSD scale item. Now these plots refer to the item information curves, and it shows you how reliable the item is for a range of theta, the one in the x-axis, or symptom severity. For instance, for the depressed affect items, 2, 6, and 9, we find that the area below each curve is larger in women than in men, which means that this subfactor is really more informative in women. We also have here items 1, 3, 4, and 11 under somatic retardation. Poor appetite is more informative in women than in men, but the opposite is observed in item 11, or getting going. Now for the interpersonal affect, as you can see, item 7, or the feeling that people are unfriendly, performs well in both genders. But item 10, or the feeling that people dislike you, is more informative in men. For the positive affect, items 5 and 8, as you can see, their curves are very flat, indicating that they provide very low amount of information. In other words, they are not very reliable. Finally, I want to take note of the finding that loneliness is more informative than sadness, as the item information curves show. This corroborates the finding that loneliness, an emotional state arising from perceived social isolation, is a better indicator of depression than just the more common emotion of sadness. Now, what results from the confirmatory factor analysis is a set of scores for depression. Let's look into the demographic variation in depression scores. First, in terms of gender, women had generally higher scores. In terms of age group, in men, there seems to be an increasing trend and a slightly curvilinear pattern, but there were actually no significant age differences in the depression score by age in men, except for that sudden elevation in depression score at the oldest age group, 85 to 89. In women, on the other hand, the curvilinear age pattern is more evident. It's a U-shaped pattern, concave down with trough at age group 75 to 79. In terms of the other social demographic variables, here I present the median general depression scores. So the values are to be taken in relative terms. The more negative, the less severe, the closer to 0, the less severe symptoms, and then the closer to 1, the more severe the depression. Significant urban-rural differences was found only in women. Married older persons had less severe depressive symptoms in men and women. And among those who are unmarried, Older women who are living alone had more severe symptoms, while there was no difference between men living alone and men living with others. Higher educational attainment also corresponded with lower depression scores. In terms of socioeconomic status, depression becomes less severe as household wealth increases. And finally, working older persons had significantly lower depression scores. Now, the next set of results show the multivariate associations controlling for the item bias. In terms of the social demographic variables, as you can see in the table, most variables in which we had found significant variation earlier were no longer significant in men, except for the wealth index. But first, let's look into age. The quadratic age term proved significant only in women, and the graph on the right plots the relationship. The severity of depression declines until about age 85, at which it begins to increase. In terms of other social demographic variables, urbanity was not significant. Being unmarried, regardless of living arrangement, was significantly associated with depression in women, but not in men. Also, college education and employment were independently associated with less severe depression in women. The only significant correlate for both genders was the wealth index. The coefficient is negative, suggesting that increasing wealth score is associated with less severe depressive symptoms. Now, in terms of the health-related variables, both trouble with pain and a heart illness diagnosis were positively associated with depression in men and women. High blood pressure was associated with depression. Other variables are not significant. Now let's turn to the psychosocial variables. The gender difference is more pronounced in intergenerational exchanges, and I will expound on this finding later. For both genders, being a member of a secular organization was also a negative correlate of depression, hinting at the possible effects of social interaction on depression. Finally, there is no evidence that any of the three behavioral variables I considered, namely drinking, smoking, and daily physical exercise, were significantly associated with depression. Although I must take note that for drinking and smoking, I only considered whether they were drinking and smoking at the time of the survey and not really the amount of substance that they are taking. So at this point, let me wrap up the results and make sense of them. From the earlier very technical discussions, let's try to make sense of these findings. Now, this diagram sums up the significant correlates of depression in men and women. But there are two important gender-related questions that I want to highlight. First, why do women have more severe depressive symptoms than men? Second, I draw attention to receiving material support. It is linked to higher depression scores in men and to lower scores in women. So what can we possibly infer about how intergenerational exchanges, gender, and depression are linked? First, I note that both the affective and somatic dimensions of depression are both important in men and women, but the affective dimension, particularly the depressed affect, is more pronounced among women, while somatic retardation is the most prominent facet of depression in men. This difference in the conceptualization of depression could have theoretical consequences or implications as to why women tend to have more severe symptoms and are more likely to be depressed. A few studies have noted, for instance, that depressed women tend to be more ruminative and are more emotionally aware than men with similar levels of depression. Now to my second question. What explains the link between gender, intergenerational exchanges, and depression? One explanation that the literature offers is the concept of role identity. It essentially argues that the triggers of depression or the emotional impact of events relates to their importance in men and women's role identities. For example, in the study, we find that receiving material and giving emotional support are associated with lower depression scores in women, while living alone is associated with more severe depression in them. These things relate to the family. particularly women's connection with their children, which has been argued to be more salient for women than for men. Meanwhile, in men, depression was negatively associated with giving material support, but receiving it is correlated with higher depression scores. And this is something that reflects their masculine ideals. Our society tends to view men as the family provider, and so receiving material support goes against this very identity. But we also have to take note that providing financial support is associated with higher depression scores in men. This is inconsistent with the role salience theory, but here the concept of social exchange could be relevant. For instance, it's possible that giving financial assistance to children represents a burden to older men and an imbalance in social exchanges with their children. This makes sense when you consider the fact that due to poverty, many older men are still working despite their advanced ages. Now, let me discuss the other significant findings from earlier. We found a significant U-shaped relationship between age and depressive symptoms in women. And several studies have observed this pattern, but they are not very clear as to why depression declines in earlier ages. Some authors attribute this to increased resilience and emotional selectivity of older women. But what could explain the upward slope at the most advanced ages after age 85? One explanation is the cohort effect. Incidentally, women aged 75 to 95 at the time of the LSAT survey belong to the so-called silent generation, or those who were born between the Great Depression of the 1920s and the Second World War in the 1940s. These childhood experiences may have turned out to have adverse effects on their psychological well-being. It's also possible that this rise in depressive symptoms at the most advanced ages represent a terminal life crisis. People at this age are very frail, and so their conditions and the creeping idea of death could contribute to a terminal life crisis. And this is something that qualitative studies in the future could investigate. We also found that being unmarried is independently associated with depression only in women, while unmarried women who are living alone have higher levels of depression than those who are living with others, say any of their children or their relatives. Most women who live alone are actually widows, and they are less likely to give emotional support and receive material support from their children, which we found to be associated with less severe depression. So in a way, the relationship between depression and marital status and living arrangement could be partially explained by intergenerational exchanges, which could cushion the impact of widowhood on older women. Education, too, is found to be significant only in women. This supports the finding that education offers a protective effect against depression. It could be that education results in higher cognitive functioning, healthier lifestyle practices, and some sense of cultural entitlement, thus improving their psychological well-being. But the more obvious link is that better education more or less translates into better socioeconomic status. And of course, it would improve one's health outcomes in late life. Surprisingly, work is significant only in women. Many self-employed women are managing sari-sari or the household retail stores. And this is quite funny because it was only after writing my thesis that I noticed that 8 of the 9 sari-sari stores within our vicinity, and I really counted them, are actually being managed by older women. And perhaps you can also check this finding within your vicinities. This finding can be viewed from the lens of continuity theory. Essentially, the continuity theory argues that older persons desire to preserve their existing psychological and social patterns earlier in life. In this case, unlike in older men, work provides older women with a sense of economic control, the satisfaction of providing for the family, and some opportunities for socialization. Finally, other correlates of depressive symptoms are also worth discussing. Pain is a significant correlate of depression for both genders. We must stress that there is pain because there is an underlying condition. It could be that a significant portion of older persons have undetected and untreated conditions. Heart illness, too, is associated with higher depression scores. This relationship could be mediated by adverse behaviors like smoking, inactivity, or medicine non-adherence. There's also some evidence that depression and heart illness have shared genetic causes. A counterintuitive finding is that hypertension corresponds with less severe depressive symptoms. But there is in fact a longitudinal evidence that suggests that those who have hypertension are less likely to develop depression later. Depression is also associated with membership in non-religious organizations among women. In a previous study, I found that most of these organizations take the form of senior citizen associations linked to the Office of the Senior Citizen Affairs. And so I argue that aside from opportunities for social participation, it's the perks of membership in these secular orgs, particularly the senior citizen IDs, that could be behind the association between org membership and lower depression scores. So building on the findings I have presented and discussed, what can we conclude about late life depression in older Filipinos? First, the study found that depression, as measured through the Csd scale, is a multidimensional construct. This means that simple sum scoring may obscure the differences between the Csd scale indicators. Second, we found socio-demographic variations in the severity of depressive symptoms. Third, the experience and correlates of depression are also gendered. We've seen that depression is prominently affective in women and more somatic in men. There are also differences in terms of how intergenerational exchanges are associated with depression, and they reflect older men and women's role identities. Now, what do the findings imply in terms of policy? First, the association between depression and pain highlight the need to identify and manage both conditions. These are not normal consequences of aging. Both pain and depression management should be part of the free holistic medical packages being provided to our older persons. And on a related note, we need to support, strengthen, and expand the pension program and similar social welfare interventions, having noted earlier the socio-economic disparity in depressive symptoms. The LSAP report underscores that older persons have extremely low level of financial resources. Right now, we do have that 500 peso monthly pension program, but that obviously can only go so far in supporting their monthly expenses. The senior citizen ID, on the other hand, is only useful to those who have spending power in the first place. Third, we also need to consider the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown on older persons' psychological well-being. Policymakers should especially consider older persons who are living alone, older men and women who may have been separated from their children and loved ones, and those who were widowed by the virus. We need to expand, for instance, psychological counseling, telehealth services, and community-based interventions for older persons. Finally, the findings emphasize the need for gender-sensitive and gender-responsive, if I may stress, interventions in screening and addressing late-life depression. Older men are found to be generally reluctant to depression treatment, or even to the term depression, due in part to their masculine image. Among women, depression may be triggered or compounded by family events, like the phenomenon of empty nest, as was observed in China, and the death of their spouses. It's important that we take a gender lens in our interventions. Now, in terms of research, the findings demonstrated that the Csd scale is a multidimensional instrument which can be used to assess depressive symptoms in the older population. But we may want to think about whether or not to include positive affect items in the next usage of the Csd scale. Several studies, in fact, have recommended dropping the positive affect from the scale, especially in low and middle income countries. Second, as we have shown, there are differences in the symptomatology and correlates of late life depression, and so gender must be accounted for in the analysis. Third, future studies can examine the interaction between age and cohort to explain the curvilinear relationship we found earlier in women. This is possible in the next waves of the LSAP. If I may add too, perhaps the next wave of the LSAP can validate the Csd scale so we can finally have a cutoff score to work with. Finally, the study demonstrated the strength of the multiple indicators, multiple causes, or mimic model in filtering out item bias and giving confidence in the results. On a final note, efforts to mainstream mental health in public discourse and policy development should give attention to the early signs of late life depression and the unique and unmet psychological needs of older persons. In many parts of the country, depression and other mental health problems remain largely untreated and stigmatized. We look to older persons as paragons of wisdom and resilience, but that does not mean that they can manage all alone. Their years of experience do not make their suffering any less concerning. So before I end this presentation and receive a few questions, allow me to spend a few words for some acknowledgements. First, my deepest gratitude to the PSSC and the family of Dr. Loretta Makasiar Sicat. Just being nominated for this award has motivated me more to do research that is relevant to the needs of the population. Second, this thesis is supported by a grant from the Josefina V. Cabigon Memorial Scholarship. And so I want to thank the family of the late UPPI director, Josefina V. Cabigon, who was among those who spearheaded interest in the study of aging in the Philippines, as well as the UP Medical Alumni Society in America, or UP-MASA. Third, the members of my panel, my very supportive and motivating advisors, Dr. Grace D. Cruz and Dr. Yasuhiko Saito, my critic, Dr. Elmo T. Laguna, and panel members, Dr. Maria Paz and Marquez, and Dr. Jose Antonio Clemente. And finally, I want to thank my home, the UP Population Institute Research and Development Foundation, who have been at the forefront of producing and analyzing population data across various age sectors. And with that said, I encourage everyone, especially the social scientists and policymakers in the audience, to check out the rich sources of data that are painstakingly gathered and analyzed by the UP Population Institute and its partners, including the DRDF. The beauty of demography as a discipline, as Ma'am Grace mentioned, is its multidisciplinary nature. A sociological lens can dispel several notions on aging. A political science perspective can shed light on the role of peace and stability on the migration of people. Or an anthropological lens can help us understand the behavior and practices of today's generation of tech-savvy youth. Clearly, we need every voice in our conversations about the diverse populations of the country and the world over. And so here ends my lecture. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for your lecture, Mr. Afable. That was very thorough. And again, congratulations on your award. Now let us proceed to the next part of our program. We now invite questions from our audience so they can join in the discussion. For those joining in Zoom, you may place your questions in the question and answer box below. For those of you who are joining us through Facebook Live, you may send your questions through the comment section of the live video. Now, we have some questions here that we have collected from our audiences in advance. Would you please humor us, Mr. Afable? The first question is, what's the significant distinction between late life depression and the usual diagnosed depression?
Yeah. In my study, I focus on late life depression. It shares core symptomatology with depression in, like, for instance, in among adults or the youth, but there are specific symptoms that is unique to older men and women. For instance, the somatic symptoms, they tend to be more prevalent among older people. That's actually the more defining feature of late life depression, the somatic symptoms like lethargy or like lack of motivation. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. We have another question here from an anonymous attendee. What can you say about the national mental health policy of the country in relation to your study's findings?
Yeah, I think the Mental Health Act is a welcome development. It took several years to be finally enacted in 2017. But despite its passage, we have to take note that just about 5% of our healthcare expenditure is given to mental health care, despite the fact that we have the third highest rate of mental disorders in the Western Pacific region. But the policy is there, I think. The framework for the National Mental Health Program, for example, it explicitly states that interventions must be sensitive to age and gender, but we have yet to see how this is really done in practice. I also like that the NMHP framework mentioned the need to adopt a balanced approach between community-based services and specialized facility-based interventions. given the fact that majority of our older persons are not very receptive to the idea of institutional care. But yeah, in any case, much needs to be done, really. Our national mental health program should be properly funded and implemented to ensure that mental health care, both in its preventive and curative aspects, is given attention, especially among the elderly.
I completely agree, Mr. Afable. It's great. Now for our next question. Was the researcher, you, able to disaggregate and compare across sexual orientation and or gender identity for older men and women?
Yeah, that's one of the limitations of the data we have. We only have information on the sex assigned at birth of the sample, but I chose to use the term gender and men and women because I focused on the social aspects of depression in late life rather than the biomedical. So I opted to use gender. But that is a very valid point, and we have to look into the particular experiences of, for instance, the LGBT older people. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Fable. We have another question here from another anonymous attendee. Why is the use of some scores not advised for summarizing psychological data like the Csd scale?
Right. For one, psychological data tend to be highly skewed, and so you cannot just apply simple sum scoring because that might yield to misleading results. Second, if you think about it, sum scoring is actually just factor analysis, but you are constraining your factors to have equal contribution to the latent factor, and that is quite that's not a very logical assumption. So yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Sir Afable. We have another question here. I think you've touched on this earlier during your lecture. Have you found any correlation of depression for individuals who are retired from work versus those who are still actively employed?
I only looked at the work status, and I found that among women, working is negatively correlated with depression. Yeah.
Right.
So I think it captures that whether or not the person is working or not, and we covered those age 60, so more or less those who retired from work but are still working in other like informal sectors, etc. So it that variable could capture that.
All right, thank you very much. We have another question here from another anonymous attendee. What particular topics, based on your findings, would you suggest for future researchers to explore?
Yeah, I think that finding on the terminal, like the spike in depressive symptoms at the oldest stages, we could, for instance, do a phenomenological investigation on the experience of older people who are suffering late life depression at the terminal ages. We could also look into the life cycle impacts on psychological well-being. Like I don't think we have proper life cycle study in the Philippines, but it's really interesting to see how, for instance, marriage or major life events like bereavement or death could impact psychological well-being later on. And maybe we could also look into the coping strategies. I've only discussed the nature and possible causes of depression in late life, but we haven't talked about coping strategies of older persons. It's dangerous to just assume that older persons are socially secluded. Older persons definitely have their means to support themselves, to fight depression. And so we can look into qualitative studies in particular, can look into coping strategies like the role possibly of religion. Our older persons are very religious, and we could look into how it affects depressive symptoms.
All right, I think you've answered that very well, Sir Afable. Now, so for some of our last few questions here, how do you make psychosocial services accessible and affordable to all people, regardless of age, race, creed, gender, or social status?
Yeah,
This is pretty
that's a pretty big question,
loaded question.
and I don't think I can answer that to the point, but um I think really funding is the number one issue that aside from stigma, funding is really the number one issue that confronts our mental health care system. The government really has to prioritize, to give attention to the country's mental health. It's really and not only understudied, it's also underfunded, really. So maybe the policy geeks in the audience could share their insights on this issue.
I see, sir. That's very valid considering how things are going right now in our country with regards to mental health and depression.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now for our final question so far. In Now that you've shed light that depression is a problem for our aging demographic here in the Philippines, what effective intervention can possibly work for them?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier telehealth services. I did not really expound on community-based interventions, but in other countries, they have various activities for older persons to make them more socially engaged. Like maybe we can work on various physical exercises or social activities. We know there's yoga activities for our older person, but perhaps you can expand this more. Like in my earlier study, for instance, I suggested that we should tap into older persons' volunteerism. Like they are very much willing to volunteer if only there's an opportunity. So perhaps that could improve their psychological well-being. So yeah, I think community-based interventions really um, could help alleviate depressive symptoms in older men and women.
I see. Thank you very much, Sir Afable. Now we're opening the floor to anybody who would like to ask Sir Afable directly. Please just raise your hand and we'll address you ourselves. Is there anybody here who would like to do that? Go ahead. Don't be shy. We're all people here who would like to learn more about the knowledge that Sir Afable is just finished studying. All right, I'm not seeing anybody so far. We have another question here from another anonymous attendee. Did you include the experiences of the very vulnerable elderly, for example, the marginalized, the poor, the illiterate, and I think you've already included the ones that are living alone?
Yeah. We can. I think some of the variables are able to capture that, like socioeconomic status, like the lowest wealth quintile that actually represents the 20% poorest population of older persons. They also mentioned, sorry, what other?
The marginalized poor, the illiterate, and
Yeah, the illiterate, for instance, we covered those who in educational attainment, we covered those who attained elementary education or lower, high school education, and college or higher. So I guess those disaggregation can capture that. But of course, if we have a more, particular representation of the marginalized group, then we can definitely study that in relation to depression.
All right, I think that's all the time we have for our questions. Thank you very much, Sir Afable, for entertaining all of the questions that we have for you. Now, thank you very much again to everybody who participated in the discussion. Before we end this morning's event, we are privileged to be in the presence of the person whose idea it was to establish an award honoring her mother. To give a message and to congratulate Mr. Afable, on behalf of the Sicat family, we have here with us the second child and eldest daughter of Loretta, Makasiar, and Gerardo Sicat, Together with her father, she conceptualized the idea of giving the Philippine Social Science Council a grant that would be administered in the form of an award. She is joining us from Northern Virginia, minutes away from Washington, D.C., where she has lived for over 30 years. Everyone, please let us welcome Miss Michelle Sicat Powell.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Afable, for sharing the highlights and the key findings of your winning study. And thanks to PSSC for giving our winner a forum to share a synopsis of his thesis. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank those who've made this award possible, in addition to congratulating Sanny Afable. Okay. The LMS Award is a 5-year grant to the PSSC, saved from my many years of work as a management consultant. But this project would not have been possible without the help of my father, Gerardo P. Sicat, who who served as an advisor and continues to serve an advisor for this project. I have to admit that this whole project has given me an opportunity to work with my father, which has been a great privilege for me. So thanks, Dad. I also want to thank Dr. Portis for her enthusiasm and leadership in making the LMS Award happen. From the very onset of our communications with Dr. Portis, she demonstrated commitment to administering the program in an objective, rigorous, reliable, and repeatable fashion, just like a talented social scientist would do. This is critical because the value and the integrity of the award rests on the dedication and objective work of the judges. Thanks to the PSSC, who under the direction of Dr. Portis and Wilson Villones, who headed the staff. Yeah, we worked very closely with Wilson. Kept my dad and I in the loop every step of the way. And we thank Sinis and Yata and all those who contributed to the videos, both the award video as well as the lore, L-O-R-E, of lore, short for Loretta, which is a video on my mom's life and her contributions. So I thank you for that. Everybody we worked with has been just really a joy to work with. And so I'm very confident that the future LMS awards will be administered in the same professional and dependable way. I must say that I learned so much from this project. I learned about my mother's collegial relationships and professional contributions, and how she, by just being her unassuming and principled self, inspired many. My background is in business, and as a professional who focused her studies and career in business and management for over 30 years, I realized that my world is narrow. Through this project, I learned about the breadth and impact, and therefore the potential impact of a grounded social science study, or of grounded social science studies. I also learned about the breadth and depth of the PSSC, its crucial mission, and how the PSSC diligently works towards accomplishing its mission. That's on an everyday basis. So congratulations, Sanny Afable, for really a very well-written, timely, and practical thesis. I'm very happy for you because, as you mentioned in your introduction, conducting this study actually has given you purpose, right? And it's something that's important in averting and controlling depression, right? Having purpose. I think your chosen topic couldn't be more timely, right? The population of those over 50 years old in the Philippines in 2020 was nearly 19 million, over 5 times the number 5 decades before. And also, the numbers of those over 50 years old have increased at an annual rate of up to 5% in 2010. That percentage decreased by about a percent in the last 10 years in 2020, but that's probably because of the pandemic, which in and of itself, can contribute to depression in many age groups. So on behalf of PSSC, my dad, and the rest of the Sicat family, congratulations, Sanny Boy Afable. Best wishes for a bright future. We are proud of you, and we hope that your thesis, as well as your gifts of writing, your gifts of applying the scientific method, and the subsequent analysis can be shared and used to further interdisciplinary research. We also hope that your thesis can promote public policy applications to prevent or delay and curb late life depression in the Philippines. We wish similar successes to those who submitted their master's and doctoral thesis for award consideration. Prize winning or not, those who do their best are winners. Right? We were pleased with the breadth of social science disciplines and the regions represented by the applicants in this inaugural LMS award. In the coming years, we look forward to more applicants for an even wider range of universities in the country, representing an ever-growing range of social science disciplines. May the LMS Award help spur the pursuit of excellence and the desire to advance the social sciences in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss Michelle. Before we proceed, we would like to invite Dr. Pertus, Dr. Tangsan, along with Miss Michelle Sicat Powell to a short photo op along with our winners, Sanny Boy Afable, Wilfred Gabriel Gapas, Miko Galang, Jun Michael Salcor, and Maria May Santin.
Johan, may we also invite one of the members of the Board of Judges, Dr. Elena Pernia, who is here with us today. Hi, Dr. Neni. Can you please show yourself? Hello.
Please allow me to turn on my video. My video won't show. I'm sorry.
It's okay. All right.
All right, I believe we are all here. Our lead technical, Sir Miguel, whenever you're ready.
Hi everyone, please stand by. I will be taking the screenshot. Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. One more. 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, okay na po. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as we are nearing the end of this event, may I call on the immediate past president of the Philippine Population Association, who is also an assistant professor of demography at the UP Population Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, let us listen to Dr. Elma P. Laguna for her closing remarks.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And so we have a very interesting day today, listening to a young scholar talking about issues of older people. So Sanny's presentation unpacked a lot of important findings regarding the state of older Filipinos, how older men and women navigate the stage of the life course, the role of the family, such as intergenerational relation and exchange, work involvement, and other correlates of depressive symptoms in later life. Sanny wrote and completed his thesis during the early months of the pandemic, and I'm happy to note that he was able to incorporate the impact of the pandemic on older people and on his findings and recommendations. So we have a lot of work to do. Again, our thanks to the Sicat family and the PSSC for the LMS Prize Award for the Social Sciences. I hope that this will encourage more young scholars to pursue research in the social sciences in the coming years. Thank you also for all the attendees for joining us in this lecture. Mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laguna. We are now at the tail end of our program. We would like to thank our distinguished speaker and awardee, Mr. Sunny Boy D. Afable, for sharing with us his award-winning and relevant work, Demographic Correlates of Late Life Depression in the Philippines, Exploring Gender Differences. Again, we congratulate you on your achievement. Congratulations too to the other finalists of the LMS Prize. We also extend our gratitude to the Sicat family as well as the University of the Philippines Population Institute for gracing this event. We also thank the officers and the staff of the Philippine Social Science Council who worked tirelessly on the preparations and behind the scenes of this event. We also thank our viewers today for joining this timely and relevant discussion. That's you! We request you all to send us your feedback on this session to help us improve on our future events. The link to the online evaluation form is now flashed on your screens and will be posted in the chat box and the comment section of the Facebook Live video. Only those who are able to accomplish the form by 5 p.m. today will receive an e-certificate of attendance for this event. For those who would like to view this event again, a recording will be available shortly on our Facebook page and eventually on the PSSC website as well. Also tune in to our page for announcements on future webinars and other PSSC events and activities. This ends the program for the conferment ceremony and scientific lecture for the 2022 Loretta Makasiar Sicat Prize for the Social Sciences. Again, thank you very much and good day everybody. Mabuhay.
See you all next year. This is an annual event, so hope to see you again.
Recording stopped.